Hi guys, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for your time. Let's give a couple of minutes before everybody can join. Thanks, Simon, for your time to join this webinar and share your insights, valuable insights on the future state of automation, how it's going to change from activity-driven to the data-driven automation. We have got a very good response for this particular webinar. If you are So I think we can start now. Thank you everyone for your time. We have got Simen Munter with us as part of our Mind Speak series on latest what's happening in the automation world. Simen, I think, is not an unknown name. He was one of the visionary who started RPA 6 years back in one of the leading banking organization in Australia, ANZ Bank. And Simen has been our mentor. He gave us the opportunity 6 years back to start RPA, and he has led RPA in various other organizations in his lifetime, in his previous lives. I will let him introduce himself. He has worked in, he was recently CEO at Bank of Nodia, and he was also leading automation initiative, among other things, at Bank of Nodia. He has joined us on our customer advisory board to guide us on the next phase of our growth, but most importantly, the next phase of automation. About myself, I am Mohit Sharma. I'm founder and executive chairman for Mindfields. We were the first one to start RPA in Australia and also among the first few globally. But I think we have been very blessed to have Simen here, who led us into this offering of RPA 6 years back. Up to you, Simen. You want to say some words here?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mohit, and great to be here, and welcome to all the participants. I'm been delighted to be associated with Mindfields now, and also for the opportunity to work with and get insights from Mohit and the team there over the years. I was tremendously excited at the time of the opportunities around robotic process automation as a new approach. And I've been working a lot with that, as Mohit mentioned. And I think that there is tremendous change in technology now, which gives us opportunities to look at automations in ways we couldn't do before. And I'm very glad that I can work with people like Mohit and the team there to further develop these ideas and say, how can we actually make sure we do things smarter in the future? So thank you very much, Mohit. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you, Simen, again for this opportunity. We have been mentioned and ranked by Gartner, IDC, HFS ranked us as #2 globally as a voice of customer. Deloitte has ranked us as the fastest growing company in Australia among top 20 in 2017. We have got various offerings in automation, testing, data wrangling, data visualization, and also we have got our own product called MindEasy. We have done a lot of research work. RPA, which we did 6 years back, was groundbreaking, and we have not made it free of cost on our website. We want to educate the community so they can make better decisions. So not taking much time here, I would like to start the webinar, and please feel free to ask your questions through chat windows, and we'll try to address them at the end of the webinar. So some, a brief agenda for the webinar. We'll discuss automation landscape, current and future state of automation, example of a data-centric automation, some polls in between to keep you awake, some comparison, and most importantly, our framework, and how to move from current state of activity-based automation to data-centric automation. So current automation landscape, I think it is not new to most of the participants who are in the call. It is mostly rules-based screen scraping, RPA automation, RPA, which was there 4 years back, 5 years back, have further transformed into intelligent automation using various technologies like NLPs, AI, and it is becoming from simple to complex. It is making us the bots more smarter, and it is also providing a high end solutioning from micro-based spreadsheet outcomes. Now we are talking about making decision on how to give loan, on when to give loan, and when not to give loan. Such complex processes are getting automated also using various new technologies like NLP, machine learning, big data. So from RPA to hyperautomation, from simple to complex, we are evolving. But things are also becoming complex. Maybe this is a transitionary phase towards more data-led automation. So you can see RPA was mostly unstructured data, can't be processed. There was no judgment-based processing, high touch points. But as we progress further, now we can resolve unstructured data. And as we are progressing to next stage, we can do judgment-based processing also. So this is the current state or the landscape on how we are evolving. Simen, your views on that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. We see, I think that we have seen a lot of benefits from the approaches to date. As we've been working with robotics, we have been able to automate them and get much higher efficiency ratios in certain processes. But it's come at a cost in that it has basically made the complexity of maintaining the overall IT platforms harder, because now when you change something somewhere, it tends to have you have more things to look after to make sure that it's successful. So, but I think it's been a good journey in this area. We have learned a lot of things, but I think it's difficult to believe that doing more things on top of what we have already in the same way is going to materially change the way things are happening.
I mean, I agree with you on that, Simen. So this brings to the progression towards data-led enterprise. So the current state is that we have more in the transaction-based, operational-based org structure. So which means the automation will start from the area where you have more human beings. And we can see that it started from shared services, back offices, and is in the optimized state, it will be more using AI technologies. And the future state will have less transaction, but more strategic. And we can see that in the future state of automation, you will have more strategic automation than technical or operation-based automation. Your view, Simen, on this?
Yeah, and I think that what we see today is that we have lots of people who have whose job is to operate, do standardized or do processing, do things on our computers. And I think in the future, what we will see is that our people will deal with the exceptions. In some processes, that's the case already. But I think that to a large degree, we will not have people which knows what they will do next day, because they will deal with the things which didn't fit into the automated processing system.
Yes, I think, and you can see that future state will be also changing the future of workforce to a large extent. So I also want to do one poll here to understand the views of the participants, that have you achieved a positive monetary return on the investment from activity-centric automation? As most of the participants here have done some sort of those, automation. So I will request for the participant to vote. You can see on your screen. And I will. Simon, when we have put here monetary return on the investment, what are your views on non-monetary return from the automation?
Yeah, generally, when you automate anything, you get a lot of side benefits. You get consistency, you get ability to handle larger volumes. So it's not difficult to see that there are that you get benefits. I think the challenge we see, at least in some areas, is that the costs of building and maintaining the robotic infrastructure is more or less offsetting the benefits you get. So the total cost base for the enterprise stays flat. And that's a concern, basically. We are not doing activity-centric automation only to make the life of our people better. We would like to save some money. And I think the partial part in this slide illustrates this, is that whilst, or at least what I've seen, is a lot of calculations which says that the robotics process is amazingly profitable. But a lot of that data is coming from the RPA vendors themselves rather than from the companies using the RPA. So I think here that if you look at this, we are saying that 60% is saying either no or partial. So that's an interesting stat, but not a surprising stat.
Sure. I think, Simon, let's go to the next slide, and we can park this outcome of this poll for that slide, which speaks about the current state of automation, which is, ACA, just to be saving some time on speaking this word again and again. The current automation is mostly activity-centric, and that's why people are not able to get the outcome or desired ROI, and which we have seen in the previous poll outcome. The major being the scaling challenges. Your views, you have worked in more, you have used RPA in at least 3 organizations in the past, and we have done the same thing. So do you agree with that view?
Yeah, I just want to say, maybe start with saying that we know it's mentioning in the RPA context, but this also applies in the more traditional heavy coding context. That a typical process for automating anything, would be that, for instance, to be a little bit modern, we look at the customer journey. We map the customer journey, we follow that journey through all the processes, we build the logic within that one, and then we automate them the way the humans do in a process flow. So things like that map you see there is a very typical kind of setup. We look at the process, look at the systems, we look at the people, we ask the people what they do, and then we see what is automatable. And the challenge with that is that there are so many processes, and a process doing something from the contact center works different often than a process working from a branch or from the website, etc. So you basically get an incredible amount of processes to automate, and each process is typically very small. I think you mentioned what's the typical deal size for an automation, Mohit? What's the size of automations which people are doing?
So average RPA vendor deal size is less than 50K USD.
And I think that is a good illustration that people are automating, but they're automating in processes. And therefore you get the situation that the way you do things from one place is different from another. And if you then add in country variations, and if you're multinational, then this becomes immense. It's not unlike, you know, a large scale organization might have 3,000 to 5,000 applications. If each application has 20 processes, you get to some incredible numbers very quickly. The benefit of the way we're doing things currently is, of course, it's very easy to contain and understand, because we are leveraging what we are doing already. And everyone is very used to doing so.
Thanks, Simon. I totally agree with you on that. And all these challenges are not unknown to the users of the various RPA tools. Excuse me. So I think the next slide is very important, from where I think why the participants are here. So I think, Simon, I just want to give you a breakup or composition of the participant today for everybody's knowledge. We have got 45% senior executive from business side. We have got 25% executives or participant in this webinar who are from data side, like head of data, a CDO. 15% are automation executives, 10% from IT, and 5% various. So you can see that senior executives from business are here in the majority, and they would like to understand what is the future of automation. Everybody is here, Simon, to listen to your views on this topic.
So no pressure. So thank you. So I want to go back a little bit before I say this, which is that I was fascinated with you know, how Google could hold such a high uptime on their data centers. And one of the things they were saying, they have written a book about it called SRE. So if you're interested in that kind of things, it's quite a good book. But one of the things they are saying there is that they will not allow humans to touch their systems, because if humans touch their systems, that introduces a variability which is not controllable. So what they are saying is that if a human is touching their system, they will consider it a bug. In many services, we consider touching a system a job. That is what people do. They touch their systems. They key in things directly. One thing which which I've seen as we have been building robots is that the problem is not building the robots or building the APIs. It is getting the data in the right format to give to the robot. So with the right data, everything is automatable. And I think this is one of those big things, that if we have the right data, then we can redefine, or we can actually redefine what we see as our people's jobs. We should say that we shouldn't consider people's jobs to be to do the work, because the robots will always, or the APIs will always do the job more efficient. Our people job must be to create the data to enabling the robots or APIs to be effective. And if you look at data, saying that, so if you redefine what people are doing, and we're saying that your job is not to do the work, it is to create the data sets on which the work can later then be automatically done. Then we are flipping in to a set where there are very good tools around big data. And of course, as soon as you have with data, then you get a lot of benefits around the data sets, that you can actually look data up from what you have done before. So instead of doing a transaction, instead of simply doing, you can actually then look at what historically has been done when people see things like this. So for instance, in banking, I've seen situations where our customers have standing orders which are incorrect, and then they're repaired manually. So payments are coming in, they are wrong, they get repaired and get released. But this company has not changed, so they keep on sending the wrong instruction, they keep on being repaired. Because with a transaction or activity-centered automation, you are focused on the transaction. You're not focused on patterns and models. So from the outset, data-centricity is fairly easy in the context that we are saying that we want to change the way we feed our automation models. We want to leverage the thinking which is on the wider data-centric enterprise, leverage those tools, and this is what this is all about. And by doing it on data, we can then also enable AI to learn from the data. So you don't necessarily need to have humans there. And I think this is one of the big changes which I'm sure will come, which is that when you go on Google and search for a TV, you get spammed on every website you go after that from people, because Google has learned something about you, that you have an interest in TVs. When our people work, we learn nothing from their work because they are not organized in the traditional way to learn. So we need to change that, and our framework here is helping and driving that change. And doing that will firstly help bridge between automation technologies, in that, RPA is a tool, APIs are typically a better tool. We would like to use whatever thing for automation as we can. We become much more open-minded to which technologies we do, and we also enable reuse of data in a way which we cannot do with Activitycentric. And we will give a little bit more examples and talk a bit more about this in the context of both an example and in the context of a framework.
Sure. So Simen, before we go to the example, can we do one more poll to understand how the participants are using data in the current state of their automation? So participants, how do you reuse data within or across the process when you do automation? And when you're polling, I just want to also let you know that API has become a very major source of automation for many of our clients. And today, National Australia Bank disclosed that they have created 1,200 APIs, and recently Salesforce Venture has also invested in an RPA company. So I think there's a vision where API will become major contributor to the data for automation at various security level, at application level, and at interface level. So I think I would like to understand your view also, that what NAB is doing to create 1,200 APIs, is that the right process, right step towards data-centric automation?
Yeah, I think that having APIs as a gateway to your applications is a big step forward. If having 1,200 is right or not, that sounds a lot to me. I know that ICICI Bank claimed that for some time ago that they had 270 or something, which they thought was sufficient. But I think the concept of opening up your systems through API is enabling, is making it easier than before. And especially if you're on the RPA side, because the vendors are very positive in the context that they're saying that the robots can work like humans. But the robots can also work like robots. So whilst an API cannot be accessed by a human, they can typically be accessed by your RPA software. So I think this is one of those elements where if you look at your role as getting data from A to B, rather than mimicking what humans are doing, then the automation areas should be a lot more interested in data and APIs than what we see today.
So Simon, if I just try to analyze the poll in front of our screen, on our screen, 40% are only utilizing the data which they are generating through automation. I still think that it is very, very high, because the tools which are being used at most of the organization don't capture the full data from our perspective for future use. I think let's look at the example to make things much more clear what you mean by data-centric automation, and I will appreciate if you can walk through the audience for that that use case or example. Just one, I will just hide the poll result, and then we can go to the example.
Yeah, so if you look in a data-centric way on something we all know about, which is I want to borrow some money, and I guess even if you're not in banking, I think everyone would have the same issue in things like how do I extend credit to a supplier, to a customer. And I think the first element here is to say that we actually we could think about this right to left rather than left to right. Because if we say that which data do we need to do to actually give someone a loan, that is a known set of data. You can look at what people do today and say which data do they know, or which data do they use, and you know that with that level of data you can automate it, either with using file transfer, APIs, RPA, doesn't really care. That if you have a certain set of data, this process is automatable. So when people say that things are not automatable, I think they are wrong. It's the data generation which might be complex. It's not the execution. Because if the execution is complex, that means that you don't have any process. So we start with data-centric by defining up which data is it we need to do the work. Then we look what data do we get to start the work. So then we flip, we don't go left to right to left, we go right, we look at the data we need, we go left, what is the data we have? And that data can be omni-channel. I mean, it doesn't really matter where the data comes from. We will basically say that the data can come from mobile, it can come from a transfer, it can come from a person keying it in. It doesn't really matter. We have a starting set of data based on what we get. And now the role is, how do I solve for the missing data? So I know what I need of data. I know what I have as a start of data, on the start of data. And in a data-centric approach, we don't necessarily follow the way things are done today. We are looking at what data do they generate? What data is it they're actually leveraging? So for instance, it might be that to analyze the loan, that you do that with human power. A human sits down and look at it. But when they have looked at it, they create some data fields which they are putting back. So we create transaction pods based around the data elements. And of course, some of this data then will be similar across processes. So you know that issuing documentation for a loan would be the same activity, whether you are doing it for an individual or if you're doing it for a large corporate. There's no need for that process to be different. So thinking data-centric enables you to look across process and make more component-based delivery. Also, so we will look at the process. It started by looking at which data did we need. We look at the data we have. We say which data is missing. We then say that that data which is missing, we want to create that by type of data. And the purpose of processing is to complete the data sets so that as soon as the data is complete, it can be executed automatically. So this capability-based thinking, component-based thinking, fits very well in with the kind of microservices-based thinking on technology. We are looking at data as such. So you can use big data tools to say, can I predict these data elements? So based on past history, since we are keeping all the transaction data, we can therefore say, we have seen this before. Last time we did it this way. And therefore the system by itself can learn. So every time the humans are updating something in their pods, we actually are helping an AI engine learn or help predict future incidents or future cases. And this human in the loop kind of approach is human in the loop on those pods which is required. So you might have a pod which has no humans in it at all. For instance, limit management might be fully automated. But you might have other elements where, or drawdown might be fully automated, or you might say that, that limit now drawdown is, in certain cases, a human will go in and say which accounts should be used, etc. But that kind of element, it supports both of those because no action happens in the middle here. It's only data enrichment. And that's why we call this a pit stop. So whilst we're talking about processing historically as a chain, you know, here we're saying that the transaction comes in, all the pods can actually access the data at the same time and proceed as quickly as possible, like a Formula 1 pit stop. So this is an example, you know, that you could you can have something coming in. We have created pods for the work, relevant work, and the work is to create data. It's not to do the work on the systems. And then when the data is ready, all the execution is done by robots or APIs or file transfers or whatever. So I don't know if that helped kind of explain a little bit around the process as such. This process can work at enterprise scale, but it can also work on a single transaction scale. And typically you would start from a single type of transaction and work your way. And we are rejecting with this setup that there are elements which are not automatable. We're saying that the process is always automatable. Some of the data generation might not be.
Yeah. So Simen, I think it's a great example for data-centric automation. Let's go in more detail using the comparison. But before we go for comparison, I do have one more poll to understand what are the views of the participants in terms of the tools to be used for data-centric automation. If you remember Simen, 6 years back when we were starting RPA with you, there was no UiPath, there was no automate, no AntWorks, and over the last 6 years, now you have unicorns, you have investment by capital G in UiPath. They have become first Teca unicorn for Romania. Automation and evaluation has gone up. Blue Prism is no longer a leading RPA tool, and they're 1/10 of the valuation of the tool which was not present 6 years back. So do you think that data-centric automation will also lead to new breed of tools for automation? Will Tableau launch an automation functionality? Will Tableau, R, Databricks, Snowflake, they will launch different type of functionality in their native tool to make automation much more easier? Hello? Hello?
Coming, which helps enable this entire workflow, which we just discussed. Which
Simen, we just lost you. So I was discussing about the tools, like how we progress from RPA tools. Do you think Tableau or Dataflex, so Snowflake, Databricks, they will launch their own automation features in their native tool?
I think, sorry, we broke up, I think, but I definitely think that there's going to be tools in this space, and some tools will evolve from what's there, and some new tools I think will come as well.
Okay, so Simen, this is the outcome of the poll.
Yeah, and I think this highlights that, you know, we have some very clever cookies in our automation areas in general, who's very comfortable with tools, and I think that if we could point them more towards data tools and that area, that will benefit greatly.
Sure. So I think, Simen, let's go in more detail of comparison between the both that type of automation. So do you want to take a lead on this, like at basic architect level and some example what we have taken here?
Yeah, so we tried here, and of course the slides will be available, but what do you focus on? You know, we speak very little about data when we're doing activity-centric automation. Which vendors are there? What's the main focus of automation? How do you want to do it? You know, ideally here with Data-Centric, we want to use clean APIs because that fits better. Integration, it's a big difference. You know, in microservices, you talk about smart endpoints and dumb pipes. Whilst for activity-centric automation, we try to make robots which are really smart. You know, here we're saying that it's the endpoints which should be smart, so therefore it's easy to maintain. You know, the focus on data as architecture, so which data do we use? what is the outcomes you're looking at? Here we really want to have the data sets. It's the main element, because with the data sets we can execute. In this case, the robots, that we actually are really looking at. The idea here is that robots are dumb, they just execute based on the data they're given. We want to, with the learning, which is a major difference, that as people do work, or we want to learn from that one. And reusability, we are looking at not only reusing what we have done from the activity-centric automation, we are saying, how can we reuse data we have seen before? And since you're looking for data, it might be that the data might not even be taken from your internal systems. You might be getting the data from external systems. You don't really care where the data comes from, as long as they're right and get in them. And then, an example, that when you onboard a customer in an activity-centric application, the more products the customer buys, the more hassle it is to automate. Whilst in a data-centric solutioning, the more they do, the more data you can likely reuse, the easier it is.
Sure. So, Simen, this leads to our next question about the framework. So in data-centric automation, the main issues which we are finding is that data is not clean. So what should be the right approach to or a roadmap to become a data-centric automation initiative?
Yes, so this framework is talking about how do you actually get it at scale. So we don't necessarily need to do it this complex to start with. But I think a key element here is that when you're looking at your financials, you have a chart of account. So if an expense comes, you know where to put it. You know what structure around your financials are typically very strong. To have a data model which is similar to your chart of accounts, which enables you to actually look at data and put them in the right place, is a critical foundation piece. You need to have a structure for your data. The next element is we want it to have a learning. So you need to have an AI tool or analytics tool, and then you need to store this data somewhere. Often we see automation processes stored in Excel and thrown away after the transaction sets. But then, of course, you have no ability to learn. And then you need to think about how do I integrate the data to the applications in the enterprise. And there we've seen things like IT areas rejecting robots to use APIs, for instance. Of course, then it doesn't work. So there's a set of foundation elements you need to have. You need to then, the process here is quite simple in the context that we are looking at 3 steps in the process, as we talked about in the examples. There's a capture process where you get the instructions in. There's an enrichment process where you kind of add the data which is missing. And then there's an execute process. Each of these elements have some key elements requirements. So one element is around how do you get the data in? We need to know something about the data which comes in to make sure that we can QA them. So basically, when you have defined up your data, you need to say what is the metadata around them, especially around things like quality. And very often we see that old legacy systems doesn't have the right level of data validation up front. But we can actually then add that in a data-centric approach, because all the data is coming through the data-centric area, where you can actually put on additional validations. So you can deal with the clean data problem at source. Your workflow tools, how do you get work around? You need to be there. And then, of course, you need to link this in to the AI tools. And there we are not after only the learning, we are also looking to see what else does this transaction tell us. So if a customer is sending all his money to his new friend in Nigeria, that is, the fraud guys will have some views on the likelihood of that. So we can actually use AI-generated insights on the data level to either upsell, cross-sell, or improve customer outcomes. And then on the enrichment side, obviously we want to make sure that we enrich so the data meets the requirements defined up in the metadata requirement. But we also want to make sure that in every where we are expecting our humans to capture, we also triggered in an AI routine to actually learn so that they can help predict and basically augment future. And then we need to ensure that we capture data in pods which are meaningful. And then as soon as you have the data right, then it's about the execution. And there, of course, we want to reuse automation paths which exists. So I'm meeting automation teams who have no idea about the APIs which exist or the file transfers which exist. This is basically a key difference. We want to reuse what's there. We don't want to build anything new unless we have to. If we have to, we know that robots work. We want to make sure that the quality is good. You're not allowed into the robots or to the APIs unless you are ready. And all execution is automated. We don't want our humans to touch it because we know that that will be a problem because people will override your data metadata requirements. And then, you want to stay in control. So you need to make sure that you're aware of when there is sorry, no, it kind of changed a bit on the screen here. Wait.
Okay. You see it now?
Maybe it's my screen, which is, yeah, sorry. So, what's the maintenance you need to do? What's the things you learned in this, which makes you, we want to calculate the value you have created with the data. And we want to make sure that there is enough monitoring, ongoing monitoring, that everything is fine. And whilst this by itself is quite a big task, set of tasks, I think it's important to think that this actually can start much simpler. So it can start in a single process, and of course, if you do it in a single process, then a lot of these things will be much easier.
So, Simen, what are your views on the future of database automation? Do you think it will kick in 6 months' time immediately, or will it take some time for the companies to become more mature?
So I think that this is a little bit like the RPA journey. I think that there are companies out there already who is thinking like this, who is working in these ways. Maybe few of them are focused on the human to data, but they are looking purely data end to end. So I think that we will see that there are people who and companies who are there. I think overall this is at infancy. I think we will see a lot of change here over the next 6 to 12 months.
So, do you think the companies who are quite greenfield in the RPA, they can adopt to this particular type of automation from day one, or they need to go through RPA first to come to our database automation?
No, I think that I think that you will benefit a lot in terms of pace if you want to have if you start out on an RPA journey by thinking data at the outset. I think this is a challenge for more mature RPA shops that since they didn't think data in the first place, they have built lots of complex robots which are having data generation embedded in them. So it's more difficult actually if you have already gone down a big journey on RPA to switch than it will be for a relative newcomer.
So one of the questions which I have got is that for the companies who have already taken RPA journey, it is difficult for them to switch to database automation because there will be a technical debt, and which might impact their. How can they avoid RPA technical debt?
Yeah, so I think here the element here is, of course, that some of the RPA technical debt can be written off if you find that you actually have an API doing the work already somewhere else. With this approach, then you can simply say, okay, we will stop that. But on the other hand, in many cases, by looking again at your RPA and making it, you don't need it to be so smart. You can actually maybe then simplify it quite relatively easily, piece by piece, by moving the logic out of the robot and into the data enrichment process. So there is ways of doing that in terms of dealing with the technical debt and increasing maintainability and increasing learning, which is available to those more mature companies.
So I will also open one more question for the audience is on this basis. So how do you think your organization is ready for data-centric automation? Immediately, yes, or in 6 months' time, or no? Simen, one example you always give to me is about checkbook. All the banks almost all the banks use the same data on the check, but still they are not able to use the same data to process their credit rating or other form of information. Do you want to give some more insights on that?
Yeah, and this is about what instructions are you getting, so and if you take a checkbook or a lost card, the information on the checks or on the card is the same, it's stable, it's worldwide more or less, it's not a big variability. But then since how people have implemented those solutions are different, therefore then they end up having to build different solutions. So whilst the manufacturing element in it should have been the same, people have solved the problem in different ways, and therefore the automation needs to go different ways. And whilst in this setup, you will then start saying, hey, the input data is the same, so that the elements of data capture and likely most of the enrichment could be the same. And therefore you get benefits across enterprises by doing it this way.
Thanks, Simen, for your inputs and insights. I would like to cover one thing, what are the next steps, in case anybody in the audience want to do a workshop for further education. I think what we have discussed today is very, very sketchy on the surface. We have to go deeper to understand your data organization, the investment, the skill set you have got in your organization to do data-centric automation. So we can do a workshop, we can assess and diagnosis for your current and future state of automation in your organization. We can design a customized roadmap for your how you can reach the future state of data-centric automation, what lessons we have learned or you have learned on the journey, which was mostly based on activity-based automation. What are the tools in the market which can fast track your automation initiative or next stage of your automation to scale up? And of course, the main important thing is to look at how to support, maintain, and monitor your database automation initiative. Simen, do you have any closing remark? We have got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, I see that we are. I'm very excited. I think that we are on the cusp of a major change in the way we are thinking about process and data. And we see that on the analytics side already, where the value of data is seen as high. I think we need to get there on the processing side as well. So, and I'm delighted to work with you on this journey.
No, again, thanks for your insight, Simen. I'm also very excited to look for next phase of automation. And I think the APIs management, we will have different type of challenges as we progress. Security, most of the RPA tools don't store data in their system. This is one of the security features they have got. So how will be the new automation tool will be behaving in the more secured world will be things we want to look into. Of course, the cost of people doing data-based automation will be much more higher than the people who are doing automation using RPA tools. So how can we educate them and bring the cost of automation down in data-centric world? So I think those are some challenges which we'll have to face and address depending upon the nature and maturity of every organization. But thing is for sure that data will become the new oil for our automation initiative to fast track and scale up.
I agree.
Yeah. So thanks again, everybody, for your time. I'm very glad and very proud that we have insights from Simen, and we will be sharing more insights with you in the future. So please stay tuned on, and we'll be sending you emails. If anybody want to download this video or this webinar, we'll send the link to you in next 24 hours. So you can share that with your colleagues, or you can reassess, reanalyze what Simen has shared, his insights. I think we are still ahead of time as we were in the RPA space 6 years back, and we will evolve. It's a starting point. Data, how we capture it, how we process it, how we analyze it, how we report it will change as we evolve. Thanks again for everyone for your time. Really appreciate and looking forward for your attendance in the next one. Please share your views. How can we improve ourselves? Your feedback, and we will try to make sure that we incorporate those suggestions from your side. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and thanks Simen for sharing your inputs. Thank you very much.